Okay, so now I want to shift from talking about the class to an important point that I want to talk about on this first day. If you're watching this from a different class, maybe we didn't just transition from talking about the class. But if you're in one of my classes, we did. Anyway, we're going to talk quickly about health misinformation and how this pertains to you as health professional. Hey, don't do that, computer. There we go. All right. So we're all health professionals and scientists, or you're on the path to being health professionals and scientists. If you are thinking about becoming an SLPA, an SLP, an AUD, any of these things, you are going to be medically adjacent. That's one of the things they call you. Some AUDs are considered even just medical professionals, right? So you're kind of in the same realm as doctors and nurses. If you're medically adjacent, you're working with them, but you're not exactly doing like surgery and stuff like that. But you're still doing things that pertain to health. And anybody at CHS is doing something that pertains to health. Now, if you're on track to be a PhD, if that's where you want to go, you probably aren't necessarily going to be a medical professional or a medically adjacent professional, but you will be a scientist. I mean, that's one of the things like me, right? I have a PhD. I'm not a medical professional or a medically adjacent professional. I don't see clients or anything like that. But I have a PhD, which gives me really in-depth training in science. Now, that's not to say that we're the only scientists there are. It's not only people with PhDs that are doing science. Anybody at any level can be a scientist. PhDs, masters, bachelors, even just people at home and children. There are a few websites where kids can participate in experiments and then learn about the study that they've helped in, which is really cool. And that's called citizen science. So the trick to being a scientist is following the scientific method and setting up falsifiable questions, trying to answer those falsifiable questions with really well laid out step-by-step processes that aren't subject to human thoughts and feelings, but will actually just show you the true behavior of whatever it is that you're looking at. That's how you be a scientist. PhD gets very in-depth training in it, and how to analyze things and present at conferences and stuff like this and publish papers. But that doesn't mean that we're the only scientists. But all of us, no matter what you're going towards or what you already are, medically adjacent professional, medical professional, scientist, whatever, all of us have the same responsibility in this respect, which is we have to educate ourselves on current health information. We have to stay up to date on health information and on the true health information. We also have to promote two things: healthy behavior and science-based practices. Right? So if you're a medical professional, that's all based on science. You might not be doing the science that pushes up your position. Some PhDs or something might be doing that, but it's based on science-based practices. So we have to know what the healthy behavior is. We have to know what things are based in science, and we have to promote those as well if we're concerned with overall health of our communities and the global situation in general. Right now, probably, I don't need to tell you this. I'm sure that you know that we're in the middle of a global health crisis. We're also plagued by anti-intellectualism and misinformation. In some cases, that misinformation is actually foreign disinformation, trying to hurt American efforts to take care of the pandemic just to keep us focused on other things, which is a problem. This is all a problem. Not everything is foreign disinformation. Some of it is just people with bad ideas. And that ties into anti-intellectualism as well. So what I want to do, knowing this, going from this for the next few minutes, is just talk about a few myths that might come up. Myths, bullshit, whatever you want to call it. We'll talk about some of these that have been floating around recently. They've been floating around for a while. I'd say the last 10 years, these have gotten a little bit more strong. But also certainly the last 2 years, these have gotten a little bit more strong. So the first myth is that scientists are not objective. They have a bias, right? So the idea here is that people say like, well, I can't trust this study because the scientists have some feeling that they're trying to push or some political agenda that they're trying to push. Well, first of all, it's important to note that it is actually true that scientists are not objective. This paper that I'm referencing here is just talking about all the different kinds of bias that can enter an experiment and measures that we can take as scientists to avoid those biases. It's not all just things like, preconceived ideas that we come in with. It's things like maybe it wasn't well controlled. And so there's all sorts of ways that bias can enter an experiment. But in terms of this like political agenda bias, we're taught as scientists to know that everyone has a bias. You might feel like you don't and you're doing an experiment, but you do. That's one of the things that we're taught. We do. We always have a bias. There's something. Even if it's not a politically based bias, we always kind of want our idea to be right. So if I come up with a hypothesis about something, I want it to be right. I mean, we're all kind of a-holes in that way. We think that we know more than, everybody. We all kind of think that we know a little bit more than we do, right? It's nice to be right. You get a little bit of a dopamine hit. It's great. But because of that, again, like I said, we're taught that this is true. Like it's drilled into us. You have a bias. It doesn't matter how right you think this is. You need to design an experiment so that your bias cannot possibly affect the results. The results are the results, and you have to go with the results even if they disagree with what you think is the way that things should be. So we have classes devoted to research methodology that we have to go through as while we're getting our PhDs. In psychology, it's a class you have to take when you're an undergrad. In speech and hearing, it's a class that you take, I think, as you're on your way to your master's. So there's these kind of research methods classes in a lot of areas. And then when you're getting your PhD, it's however long it takes you to get your PhD. So anywhere from 4 to 8 years, although I knew a guy that took 11. Yeah, it's crazy. He was independently wealthy, so he could just do whatever he wanted. So however long it takes you to get your PhD, you're in like an apprenticeship program to learn how to do good research, correct research, and control your methodology really well. So when you have controlled research, the truth is going to come out, not the researcher's bias. We're also going to talk about peer review on the next slide. And that's another way that we control for researcher bias. Because we're taught to control these things, but some people, maybe don't. There could be some researchers who don't control for their own bias. And that's taken care of in the peer review process. But if you're a good scientist, you're trying to keep your bias out of things all the time. The other thing is science is a cycle. So we're always revising things. We're always replicating studies and doing small extensions of studies or testing new ideas and seeing if they're actually better than the old ideas, even though the old ideas might still hold true. This new idea could account for more things. So when you see some of this stuff in the news, like in the very beginning of the pandemic, some scientists were saying, like, don't take ibuprofen. We think that taking ibuprofen makes you more susceptible to coronavirus. And also in the beginning of the pandemic, people were saying, take vitamin C. It can help protect you from coronavirus. And then both of those are retracted. That, some people see that as scientists not knowing what they're talking about. That's not true. That's showing that the cycle of science is actually working. So what's going on here is there's some data that shows that people who had been taking ibuprofen actually had worse outcomes. They ended up on ventilators more often than people who didn't take ibuprofen. So these were studied more in depth. Look more at people who were taking ibuprofen. What ended up showing was that was just kind of a correlation that was there in that data set but wasn't replicable. Ibuprofen seems to not have any effect on making the effects of coronavirus worse or not. So that's, again, science working. Bigger data set, look at it more closely with like 1,000 people instead of 50, and it looks like, oh, they're actually, what we saw was just a chance occurrence. And so it's not something we have to be worried about. Same thing, similarly with vitamin C, what actually ended up happening was the people that were taking vitamin C to protect themselves from coronavirus were doing other things to protect themselves from coronavirus and just happened to be a little bit more fit. It's a fundamentally different sample, essentially, is what they were looking at. So these people were taking vitamin C, but they were also wearing their masks from day one. They were exercising more and doing stuff like this. And so we ended up seeing that these people didn't get coronavirus as much while they had masks on. So even if they went somewhere, they were protected. Exercising seems to offer some protection from all diseases. It makes your immune system a little bit more robust, so they weren't getting as sick if they did get coronavirus. It wasn't the vitamin C. So the only reason you need to take vitamin C now is because those vitamin C pills taste excellent. Like candy. I mean, there was a time that I feel like when I was a child, if I had found them, I would have way eaten too many of them. They're delicious. So to sum up with this one, having testable and falsifiable hypotheses, which is what we're trained to do, and then adhering to that cyclical nature of science. This is the only way that we can find real, actual truths in the world, right? That's the only way that we can find real truths. And it's the only way that we can advance society as well. Scientific procedure with falsifiable, testable hypotheses and removing bias from the equation. So another myth that you've probably heard is that people can lie with statistics. I mean, you'll see people on both sides of the issue kind of showing things that turn out maybe not really to be accurate. There's a quote that's often attributed to, oh man, name of this person just flew out of my head. His real name is Samuel Clemens. He wrote Huck Finn. I can't think of Tom Sawyer? No, that's the other character. Okay, whatever. You know who I'm talking about. Dang it. I should have had that on the slide. Anyway, this person, Samuel Clemens. The pen name is blank. Maybe said that there are three kinds of lies, damn lies, and statistics. I have also heard that that's falsely attributed to him. Whatever. Somebody said it. So again, like the last myth, that's not totally untrue. Yes, you can lie with statistics. Of course you can. In fact, Dan Levitin, who is, he was a record producer back when there were, records. And then he got a PhD, and now he publishes books. This is a book that he published, which is essentially like how to lie with statistics, and then how to recognize statistical lies. Yeah, you can lie with statistics. But the whole premise of that book, and also the whole premise of learning kind of the 102, 200, 300, 400, and 500 level of statistics kind of thing, is learning how to do statistics correctly so that you're not inadvertently lying or lying on purpose or something like that. There are rules and best practices that we follow, best practices, not practices, that we follow when we do our analyses that hinder lying. One of those, just to give you an idea, because I don't expect you to know all these. I don't expect anybody except statisticians, some PhDs, to know all of these, is that if you remember from your statistics classes, which probably are a prerequisite for most of the classes that you're taking with me, 0.05. If you have a p-value of less than 0.05, that's support that this thing is two things are statistically different, or that there's a significant effect or something like that, right? So less than 0.05 is what we're always looking for. Let's say that you did 3 t-tests. Same data set that you collected. So you collect some data from everybody and you do 3 tests on this data set. And your chance of getting something less than 0.05 as a fluke is actually not the same thing as it is if you only do 1 test. The chance of you accidentally detecting a significant effect is greater when you have 3 tests. In fact, it's 3 times greater. So what you have to do is divide your 0.05 level of significance by the number of tests you're doing. There's a few different ways you do that. You don't always do it that way, but that's one of the most conservative ways of doing it. So you divide 0.05 by 3. I'm not going to do that math in my head right now, but it's 1 point something, or 0.01 something. So now what you're looking for is something less than 0.01, whatever it is. And so that way you're adhering to these rules and these best practices to not report something that isn't true. There's other things like that also, like reporting effect sizes or doing something called Bayesian statistics sometimes, all sorts of different things like that. Statistical lies in that case only work on people who don't know the stats well. But again, that's a lot of people who don't know the stats well. That's including a good portion of people with PhDs who aren't total nerds like I am and just, like live for the math. It's a lot of people. So in that case, what can you do? How do you know if you're actually looking at something that's lying to you with statistics? Well, peer review. You have to look at things that are peer reviewed. So when studies go through a peer review process, they usually send it out to 3 reviewers. One of those reviewers is a total nerd like me who looks at the statistics. The other people also look at the statistics, but we look at a number of things. How was the study set up? So this is getting back to myth number 1, that other people are looking at, like, did you set this up in a nice controlled way so that your bias isn't going to get in there? And then some of us are looking at the statistics and we're saying, like, this is a little weird. You've used a 1-tailed test and you should have used a 2-tailed test. Can you rerun this and do a 2-tailed test? Or this isn't the right way to analyze this, or, all sorts of things like that. We're being really picky. People hate us. But the whole idea here is so that when something comes out in a peer-reviewed journal, it's correct. It's true. It's not lying to you. So you know that if something's gone through the peer review process, it has a very good probability of being correct, of being true. Other things like self-published books, not peer-reviewed, not necessarily reporting true things. Magazines, no. Facebook, obviously, and like Twitter memes, those are not peer-reviewed, so you can't really trust those, no matter where you're seeing them or where they say that they're from. So you can't trust those. ResearchGate preprints. So there are something called preprints, which people can write a paper, and before it gets published in a peer-reviewed form, they can put it up as a preprint. Those tend to be a little bit more trustworthy because the idea is that they will then submit them to a journal and it's just out so people can read the research early. But there are some people who decide that they're going to publish preprints and they're filled with junk science. They never submit them to another journal, but it looks like it's a real paper. So be wary of those as well. And then also the news, sometimes they just report on crazy things. Sometimes good news outlets will actually report on peer-reviewed journals. But depending on the level of knowledge of the person that's doing the reporting, sometimes the interesting stuff gets hidden. We are talking about health misinformation. But in a general sense, sometimes also the more interesting thing, if we're not talking about health misinformation, we're just talking about interesting research, is hidden still in the paper. And maybe sometimes the news doesn't report on the really interesting thing. So always look for peer-reviewed sources. That's what you need to know. The third myth, and this is a little bit more pointed, is that masks don't work. I mean, so full disclosure, I don't know if the picture that I've got over here on the left is a mask or if that's a dude's head. I searched for mask. This is what it brought. It could be a head. Anyway, the myth is that masks don't work. And total, like, we're not going to do one of those things where I say, like, well, technically they don't, because they do. They do work. In fact, one of these studies, this first study by Davies and colleagues is from 2013, looking at masks. Obviously, they're not looking at mask effectiveness for coronavirus because it wasn't around then. They were looking at mask effectiveness for influenza. And guess what? They work for influenza as well. Influenza tends to be a little bit smaller, so they're not as effective for influenza as they are for coronavirus. But the masks are still effective for influenza to some degree. So this is showing that even before this, before we knew about coronavirus, people were testing out these homemade cloth masks, and they work. The N95, the medically protective ones, even paper towel, that people can make a mask out of paper towel. The study from 2013 showed that those were fantastically protective against influenza. And now we know they're also protective against coronavirus. So this isn't something that we've just started looking at with coronavirus. This is something that's been tested before coronavirus was a thing. Or this version of coronavirus, I should say. Because there are a lot of different coronaviruses. And then there's also 2 studies recently that show effectiveness of masks of any type against coronavirus. They do have varying degrees of efficiency. Some masks don't work quite as well as others. We used to think at the very beginning of the pandemic that any mask was better than no mask. That's not totally true. It looks like those gaiters, or they go up. They're like neck gaiters. One of the brands that sell them is called Buff or Buffs. I've got some. I had them before coronavirus. Like, they were good at holding my hair out of my face for like running and hiking. And then I was like, oh, I can use these as a mask. And then they're like, by the way, they don't work. Okay, cool. They might actually be worse because they can kind of slice these virus particles up and disperse them more. So definitely, if you're using one of these, consider a different kind of mask. I think even just a bandana works better than the neck gaiter. But a double layer cotton mask is what we're looking at here on this picture in the lower right hand corner. These are very effective. So what you're looking at in this whole expanse of pictures here, this first one on the bottom left is no mask. So we're looking at drops exhaled from a it's not a real person, it's like a model of a person, but the air that they're exhaling is oxygen mixed with just a little bit of liquid, which models what we exhale, with mostly gas, but a little bit of particulate matter in there as well. So you can see that without a mask, quite a bit comes out at 3 feet. Here's 6 feet. This is, like we're supposed to be 6 feet away. Well, there's still quite a bit of particulate matter hanging around at 6 feet. And even at 12 feet, there is some that gets 12 feet away. So, I don't know. 6 feet, the unmasked 6 feet rule, looking a little not so great there. But this is with just a single layer t-shirt mask, which I feel like we're beyond those now. Like, I feel like everybody has something that's not just a wrapped up t-shirt. I don't know. Whatever. Those are pretty good. Look at this. I mean, like over here, we're at 12 feet. This, right here, this legend shows 2 inches. So I think this is looking at 2 feet. This whole expanse right here is 2 feet. So you're pretty good at about 2 feet away with just this single layer t-shirt mask. Excellent. And then here's a double layer cloth mask that, like if you know somebody that sews things. They can make these. And we're looking at about 2 inches away from the face, 2 to 3 inches away from the face. That's how far the particulates will actually get through this kind of mask. Almost everything just stays right around the person's face. So you can see that it goes out underneath and just kind of blows down into the shirt. It blows up over the top of the head towards the hair, and very little actually comes out towards the people that you're talking to. So they work. They're great. And also, they work surprisingly well. I mean, like 2 inches out is like right here. So that's pretty darn good. So I also want to talk about what's going on psychologically with a lot of these myths, with a lot of people who are denying that masks work. They think that coronavirus isn't real. All these kinds of things. What's actually going on psychologically? So we've got 2 studies that we can talk about here. The first is the Ash conformity study. And this it's Solomon Asch, if you want to look it up. So people came in, participants had no idea what was going on. They came in to do a study, and they were asked down here, these bars in the lower right hand corner here, like which one of these matches the reference. And of course, it looks to me like it's C. C looks like it's maybe just a tiny bit shorter, but C looks like the right one. And pretty much everybody, would answer normally. Like, oh, C looks like the closest. Okay, cool. So then they put them into a room with more people. But the thing about those other people are they're members of the research team. And they've been told to say that the reference line matches line A. So they're lined up and they say A. And we get to the person who actually has come in to do the study. And the first time through, they might say C, and then everybody behind them says A. And after that first time of initially not going with the group, although some people went with the group on the first time, almost everybody starts just answering with the group, even though they're looking around. I mean, if you can watch the videos from this, and they're like visibly like surprised. They're like, what do you mean A? And so then it gets to them and they say A. They just go along with it. When they talk to people afterwards, some of them would say like, well, I just went along with the group to avoid being ostracized. Others would actually say that they still saw A as the right length of the line. So their perception of what they were seeing actually changed. So they couldn't even necessarily trust their own experience at this point. I mean, as the other people are saying A, they're starting to see A get longer, and then they think that the reference line matches A. And I can understand avoiding ostracism, but this is really, really a strange finding that some people would actually, like, their view of things, their actual perception of the world would change just because of this social pressure. Another study that's important here is the Milgram obedience study, which was done in the 60s. It was just, he published another thing about it in the 70s. So what happened was they brought in a participant who was kind of sat in front of a box with all these switches on it. A member of the research team was next to them, and they would tell them when to flip a switch. There's another member of the research team who's in a different room, and they're answering questions asked by this researcher that's in the same room as the participant. So they'd say, like, what color is the sky? And the other person would answer blue, and the participant wouldn't have to do anything. If they got an answer wrong, then they would flip a switch, and this switch shocked the other person. It didn't actually shock them, but they were told that it did. And then they would start to get things wrong, and they'd have to shock them, and people would be like, do I have to keep shocking them? And this person who's wearing a lab coat and standing next to him says, yes, you have to shock them. Then the member of the research team, this actor, starts complaining about their heart, that something feels wrong with their heart, and the person standing next to him says, that's not the right answer, shock them. And then they stop responding. and a no response is considered a wrong answer, so they have to continue shocking this person thinking that they've killed somebody, right? And they go all the way to shocking this person. The voltage appears to keep ramping up. Then it gets into like dangerously unsafe levels. Again, there's no shock. There's no real shock. But people leave the study thinking that they've killed somebody. And because of that, the study is shut down. Too many people are reporting having psychological issues thinking that they've killed someone. Even after they tell them that this guy was just an actor, they still had problems because now they know something about themselves, which is they would kill somebody if a person who is in a position of authority says, you have to kill this person. So that's an interesting thing. In both of these cases, the biggest thing that you can do, the best thing you can do to avoid falling prey to these things, to avoid falling prey to answering in accordance with a group who's wrong, and going along with an authority figure who is telling you something that you don't agree with, is to know about these studies. To know that this is a thing that humans do, then you can watch your own behavior for it and make sure that you're not falling into this trap. So once you know about the ASH study, you don't fall prey to it. They've tried this experimentally. People learn about the ASH study and then they're put into a situation like this and they don't fall prey to it as much. When we know about the obedience study, people tend to stand up to authority figures that are telling them something they don't agree with or that is morally wrong. And then there's a caveat here also. In the ASH study, there's another tweak that they did. One of the members of the research team who are answering the wrong way actually answers the right way. So the first person would say A, the third person might say C, and then we go down these other 7 people that are saying A. And when it gets to the actual participant, because that first person or that third person said C, they are much more likely to answer the way that they actually see this. So they'll say C. And what happens is a lot of times they'll like catch the eye of the person that says C and they're like, yo, what's up? Yeah, C. Like we're seeing things right. And it gives them the courage to actually, answer the way that they see, the way that they actually truly see the world. So the point here is you could be this person who helps other people do the right thing. So by knowing about these things and by promoting healthy behavior, say like, even if you have your vaccine, still wearing your mask indoors, helping people promote like the vaccine is safe. We should be getting the vaccine. Like, yeah, it's not necessarily as protective against the Delta variant as it was against the original coronavirus, but it still offers some protection and it offers symptom reduction for the other people who do get it. And it's safe. That's the other thing. It's a safe vaccine. So we're looking at, potentially saving lives, stopping the spread, and it's a safe thing. So even if you still get it, you probably would have got it anyway, and the vaccine isn't dangerous. So promoting these things, talking about these things, being open about what you actually think, about like adhering to this kind of healthy behavior and true stuff that's backed up by science. You could be that member of the research team who says C and allows somebody else who might not be wearing a mask or who might be putting off getting the vaccine because they think that the rest of their family or friends or something is going to ostracize them, or maybe it's even distorting their worldview. But by having somebody present the truth, it could turn their thinking around to also promote healthy behavior. So you could actually be saving lives by, having the the courage and the responsibility to do the right thing in this case. And so that's not the last thing. Okay, the last thing that I want to talk about is eating the marshmallow. This other study, which is going to seem like it's not related, but children are shown a marshmallow. And the researcher is like, hey, I got to go do something, but if you don't eat this marshmallow, I'll give you 2 marshmallows when I get back. Kids who don't eat the marshmallow are better overall at the end of their life. I mean, these not eating the marshmallow is correlated with higher SAT scores. It's correlated with higher other achievement tests that they take in high school. It's correlated with stuff into college. So it's just showing that these kids are better off if they can avoid, if they can make themselves avoid eating the marshmallow. Plus, they got 2 marshmallows at the end of the study. So cool. And the point here is like, yeah, this round 2, I mean, we all thought we were going to like, I got my vaccine, my second vaccine, 2 weeks after my second vaccine. I'm like, this is awesome. I'm going to go to the beach. I'm going to find a nude beach and just run around always. No, not true, because now, it's not safe again. So that sucks. But again, wearing the mask, not doing the things I want to do, like not going to Lollapalooza, that was I was going to say, well, anyway, that was a cluster. And, all these kinds of things, not eating the marshmallow essentially is going to be better in the long run. Like if we can all not eat this marshmallow of taking off our masks and going and doing the things that we've been wanting to do for over a year now, if we can continue not eating this marshmallow, we'll have 2 marshmallows eventually, hopefully. And we have to get these other people who are eating the marshmallow to stop eating the marshmallow so that we can all enjoy more marshmallows later. If you're catching my drift with my metaphor here, if we can just like delay, taking the masks off and doing all the things we want to do, we'll be fine. It's true. So anyway, that's the last thing. Okay, so basically, in general, peer-reviewed studies, always try to do science where you take your beliefs out of it. That's how science is done. So you have to do science the same way too, and you also have to trust that other researchers are doing that as well. The other layer of trust that you get, that you can trust there, is that there's peer review going on, so other people are trying to look to make sure that other researchers are doing that, and also not lying to you with statistics. Masks do work, and also try to promote these healthy behaviors to save lives. Because really that's kind of what we're doing here in these health professions, right? I mean, we might be focusing on, let's say, audiology, helping somebody hear. But in the general scheme of things, really what we care about is long-term health. We're all trying to stay alive for as long as we can, and trying to have the best life possible for as long as we can. So that's the goal here. Okay, that's all.